opioid epidemic continues to ravage huge parts of the country, and the question still remains, how is it that the drug industry was able to sell so many of these pills in an unmitigated fashion? Well, a new investigative report, an incredible investigative report done by 60 Minutes and the Washington Post, shows a theme that is all too common in American politics. Corruption, the revolving door of politics, lobbying, and a profit motive that led individuals to support the sale of these drugs, the unmitigated sale of these drugs, over for profit over the lives of all of these individuals who have died. Now, this story is crazy because it talks about how lawmakers in Congress unanimously supported legislation that would strip the DEA of its ability to suspend questionable and suspicious narcotic sales. And the way that they did that is they received a ton of money from these pharmaceutical industries and from distributors, so they could strip the DEA of any power that it had to regulate and to enforce laws to prevent the overuse and the overdistribution of opioids. So according to the piece, the industry worked behind the scenes with lobbyists and key members of Congress, pouring more than $1 million into their election campaigns. So what happened? What was the new legislation and what did it do to strip the DEA of its power? The new law makes it virtually impossible for the DEA to freeze suspicious narcotic shipments from the companies. That powerful tool had allowed the agency to immediately prevent drugs from reaching the street. So essentially, in the beginning, if the DEA saw that there were drug distributors, distributing a ton of opioid pills to a specific pharmacy, they would immediately freeze that type of transaction in order to investigate to make sure that there wasn't anything illegal or dangerous going on. Well, Congress passed legislation that changed the burden of proof necessary for the DEA to be able to do that. So think about it as the difference of a preponderance of evidence to beyond a reasonable doubt. There's a difference when it comes to burden of proof there. And they made it so difficult that it was virtually impossible for the DEA to step in and freeze or suspend these drug sales.
So just two things there already. Well, one is that the only reason you do that is because you want to make sure that those drugs keep on flowing. Now the drug companies have a profit motive here. They want to sell more drugs. So what do? Well, they do what is logical. They go and buy off American politicians so that they could change the rules to allow them to do that at a greater rate. So the drug companies are the #1 contributors to politicians in America, more than the oil companies, more than the banks, and they are the biggest practitioners of crony capitalism. So this story is amazing, but they also do it in other ways. They've extended their monopoly from 5 years to 12 years on some of these drugs. They don't allow us, the United States government, to negotiate for lower drug prices for Medicare. That is insane. So that $1 million that they invest winds up getting great return on investment. But the degree to which our politicians are crooked is unfortunately indescribable, because you know the results of here. It's not like anybody voting on that bill didn't know what was gonna happen. You were gonna have a bigger flow of drugs and it was gonna affect more people, it was gonna lead to more addiction. But they're like, yes, but they didn't pay me, these guys paid me. Private financing of elections leads to politicians working for private interests. In this case, the drug companies. We shouldn't be surprised when they sell us out on their behalf.
Exactly, and I want to be clear about something. This was not legislation that Congress unanimously passed several years ago. This was legislation that Congress unanimously passed in April of 2016. 2016, so this was recent, and news of the opioid epidemic was already making headlines. People already knew about what was going on. Lives were already being destroyed because of the over distribution and over prescription of these types of drugs. Now, a judge who is essentially talking about this and is writing about this for a law review journal said the following: at a time when, by all accounts, opioid abuse, addiction, and deaths were increasing markedly, the new law imposed a dramatic diminution of the agency's authority. He also says it is now all but logically impossible for the DEA to suspend a drug company's operations for failing to comply with federal law. So to give you a little more information about what this new legislation does, what this new law does, since it's not legislation anymore. They, again, unanimously passed it. Previously, the DEA could freeze drug shipments that posed an imminent danger to the community, giving the agency broad authority. Now, though, the DEA must demonstrate that a company's actions represent a substantial likelihood of an immediate threat, which is a much higher bar. Now, the reason why we know about this is because there has been a whistleblower who used to work for the DEA. His name is Joe Ranazinski, and he used to run the DEA's Office of Diversion Control. And so he focused primarily on pharmaceutical drugs and pharmaceutical drug abuse, and he saw what was going on. He fought pretty aggressively to stop this type of legislation, and unfortunately, he was unsuccessful. So now he's speaking up about it. Yeah.
There is no situation where if our representatives actually represented us, they would say, you know what, we just randomly think drug companies should be able to set any price they like, and that we shouldn't be able to negotiate on behalf of Americans. That is not a situation that exists in the world. The only reason you do that is because you're owned by them. And by the way, that happened under Bush, but it also happened under Obama, and this is during the Obama years. And both parties often play along with them. So here they are. Here's a situation where the only reason you would set a higher bar for in this case is to make sure the drugs keep on flowing and the drug companies keep making more money, even though you know the addiction is out of control in the country. Yet both parties go, well, where's my bread buttered? Not by the public. We don't have public financing. We have private financing. These guys give me a lot of money. I'm gonna do what they ask. If it leads you to have a family member who's addicted to drugs, I don't care. I already got my money.
So I want to call out a few of the politicians that were behind this legislation, those who sponsored it and those who ended up supporting it pretty aggressively. So in the very beginning was Representative Tom Marino, and I want to go to him. According to this investigative report, the chief advocate of the law that lobbied the DEA was Representative Tom Marino, a Pennsylvania Republican, who is now President Trump's nominee to become the nation's next drug czar. So a breaking news story today was that Trump claimed that starting next week, he will claim that there is a state of emergency due to the opioid epidemic. Well, you are now naming the same individual who pressured Congress to pass this type of legislation to be the drug czar. You think he's gonna look out for the best interests of Americans that are battling with this type of addiction? No, he cares about making money. He cares about looking out for the drug industry that's padding his pockets. It's just corruption 101.
So in the past, drug czar meant you were gonna fight drugs. In this case, drug czar might mean that he's the one that helps the American drug cartels push more drugs to get us more addicted and leads to heroin overdose, OxyContin overdose, and the list goes on. He is patient zero for the legislative problems that led to the addiction in the first place. Trump didn't pick him by accident. Trump will take anyone who is sold out to corporate interests and put him into the top position.
But I thought he was draining the swamp. What happened? Right.
It's gross how brazen they are about it. Because if you wanted to cover it up and you wanted to be sophisticated, you wouldn't pick Marino. You'd pick one of his lackeys. You'd pick a lower level guy who. No, he picked the guy who did the crime in the first place, not despite the fact that he helped push the drug addiction, but because of that fact. One more thing about Trump and his promises. He said that it's outrageous that under Obama we don't negotiate drug prices. He came in and immediately said that Trump will not negotiate drug prices, of course.
Yeah. By the way, when it comes to this law that passed, stripping the DEA of its power to protect Americans, Obama signed that legislation into law. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And what I found interesting was that the Washington Post made it seem as though, oh, well, you know, Obama didn't really understand or realize the ramifications. He was the president of the United States. You're gonna sign something, you're gonna sign your name and allow legislation to pass into law, you better know what's in it. And
some of the establishment press does an effective job of criticizing Trump. Even though he's part of the elite, et cetera, they consider him not part of the establishment. But man, they love to cover for Obama. And here it's ironic because they've done a wonderful report, a great job of investigating this. But you can't help but soft pedal Obama. What kind of an excuse is he didn't know what was in it? Then he should have found out. and he should have done his homework. So no excuse for the Democrats, no excuse for Obama. They always make it seem like, oh shucks, Obama didn't. And no, Obama also got private financing. Obama got his entire cabinet handed to him by a Citigroup executive back in 2008. He took every person on the list but one. His entire cabinet was handed to him by Citigroup because his number one set of donors back in 2008 were the banks. You know, all the establishment wants to do is go back to the pre-Trump days. The pre-Trump days were terrible. We had Democrats and Republicans selling us out day in, day out. It was so bad, people were so frustrated, they voted for Trump. That's how bad the pre-Trump days were.
Right, well, for the establishment, that was the status quo. And they would love to go back to the status quo. Now, let's talk about homegirl Marsha Blackburn, because I really want to call her out. Now, when it comes to lobbying, there were specific people who received a lot of money from the drug industry. So political action committees representing the industry contributed at least $1.5 million to 23 lawmakers who sponsored or co-sponsored 4 versions of the bill, including nearly $100,000 to Representative Marino and $177,000 to Hatch. Now, when it comes to Marsha Blackburn, who is a representative in Tennessee, she received $150,000. And you may know she is now running to fill Bob Corker's Senate seat in Tennessee. However, she made news last week when she ran a controversial ad that Twitter demonetized. Take a look.
I'm 100% pro-life. I fought Planned Parenthood and we stopped the sale of baby body parts, thank God.
Okay, first of all, go back and watch our video coverage of that because she's lying. Planned Parenthood never sold baby body parts, but that's beside the point. You're pro-life? You're pro-life. You repeatedly co-sponsored legislation that helped fuel the deaths of 200,000 Americans since 2011. You're pro-life? No, you're a fraud. You're a disgusting, corrupt fraud. That's what you are. And you're also a liar, by the way. So it's pathetic, this whole pro-life BS pandering to the religious base, and they buy it, they eat it up. She's not pro-life, she doesn't care about life. The only thing she cares about is that cold hard cash. She loves the corruption.
Guys, think about how crazy our system is. They're allowed to give $150,000 to a lowly representative from Tennessee. What do you think she's gonna do? You think she's gonna take the $150,000 and vote against them? No, she's gonna vote for them. Look, the first time somebody gets a donation, you might say, hey, that corporation, the drug companies are taking a gamble on someone like Marsha Blackburn. The second time they get the donation, that means that gamble paid off. Marsha Blackburn did exactly as she was told. They got a return on investment, that's why they bought her again. And that's what she is. And includes all the people in the story, including the senator that Anna mentioned there, the $177,000 to Orrin Hatch. Orrin Hatch has been deeply corrupt for decades. And all the TV and the rest of the media does oftentimes is cover for him. And they say, oh, the honorable gentleman from Utah. That honorable gentleman has taken millions upon tens of millions of dollars in legalized bribes and has done everything that his private donors have asked him to do. That's who Orrin Hatch is.
And then finally, the third part of this issue is the revolving door of politics, because the same lawyers who worked with the DEA in order to go after the industry and make sure that justice was served if there were illegal narcotics distributions, those people would leave the DEA, and then guess what? They would go represent the drug industry. In fact, the prime example in this investigative report was Lyndon Barber. He was the DEA's former associate chief counsel, and in 2011, he left the DEA to go represent the drug companies. And he is just one of many individuals who used to work at the DEA, who then went to go work for the drug industry. And the reason why that's terrible is because, well, obviously there's an issue with them not actually being genuine in being part of the DEA. It's all, it's all a show for money. But more importantly, they knew the tactics that the DEA used in order to help mitigate the sale and distribution of these drugs. And so they would go and essentially share the secrets of the DEA with the industry so they could effectively lobby for legislation that would help them out.
And unfortunately, again, the corruption is bipartisan. Howard Dean, not related to this story, but to give you a sense of it, used to criticize the healthcare industry. Then he became a lobbyist for the healthcare industry after he stopped being in the government. And all of a sudden, the progressive Howard Dean you knew, gone. Now he's doing symposiums on how the private healthcare industry is helping to save America. It's funny what somebody will do if they're paid to do it. You need public financing so they work for the public interest. If you allow for private financing, they will work for the private interests. And since the drug companies are the #1 donors in America, we are not going to stop that opioid addiction. Everything that you see will be a lot of huffing and puffing, but behind the scenes, they will almost all agree, yeah, let's give the donors exactly what they wanted, even if it costs American lives.
Exactly. And I just want to leave with one stat that should blow your mind. West Virginia is one part of the country that's really struggling with the opioid epidemic. And the article mentioned the fact that between 2007 and 2012, there was one distributor known as Miami Lucan that shipped 20 million doses of hydrocodone and oxycodone to pharmacies in West Virginia. Okay, 20 million between 2007 and 2012. But according to the piece, despite the rising death rate in West Virginia, the highest in the nation, pleas in 2013 to halt Miami Lucan's operations were ignored by the legal office at headquarters. And it was because they were pressured by Congress to leave these distributors alone, because these distributors were funding them.
These are literally drug pushers. And you want to talk about a gateway drug? It's not marijuana. It's these legalized drugs. And you don't send that amount of drugs to West Virginia and not know that West Virginia is one of the epicenters of this drug dealing that's going on, that's leading to the drug addictions, that's leading to all these deaths. They knew, the people at the company knew, the politicians knew, but they all wanted to make a buck off of you to get you addicted. And if you wind up suffering horrible consequences or even dying, they still made their money. Anybody who knew those shipments were going at that rate to West Virginia knew exactly what they were doing and didn't give a damn. If you like this video, you'll love the whole TYT network. Check it out at tytnetwork.com/join.